In this video we're gonna look at the legendary Helios-44 lens and how you can do macro photography with it as well. This lens is a legendary one mostly because of the swirly bokeh that you might have seen. It's a Soviet lens and it's a 58mm f2 and made for full frame cameras, and it's very affordable. You can get it for around $20 to $30 in great condition. I have the 44M-4 version, which I think is probably the most common one nowadays and also the cheapest one. You need an adapter to mount it on your camera because this lens comes for M42 screw mount, and both the lens and cheap adapters you can find on eBay. And to do macro photography with this lens, as we will try in this video, you also need some extension tubes. I did some experimentation and found that around 2.5 centimeters of extension tubes was the correct length to get the kind of magnification I wanted for today's photo walk. Cheap extension tubes you can also find on eBay, and these ones are for my camera system, Sony full frame, but you need to buy extension tubes for whatever camera system you have. So this lens is mostly known for the swirly bokeh effect that you can get on portrait distances. Unfortunately, you will not really see this effect in macro photography because you need to be at a distance of around 1 to 2 to 3 meters or something like that. Basically, you need the subject to be far away enough and the background to be far away enough to get the bokeh into the kind of zone where you have small discs visible, and then these discs will form a pattern that kind of looks a bit swirly, and that is what gives this lens a very unique look when you use it for portraits. So if nothing else, it's a fun lens to use for portrait photography. It's not super sharp, it is pretty soft, but it has a lot of character, and these days that is something I value very highly in a lens. So the pictures and footage you're looking at right now is actually from last summer, or rather last autumn, when I last used this lens. That was when I picked it up, and since then it has mostly been sitting on my shelf. I haven't had any time to really use this lens, unfortunately. But today I felt like going out and doing some macro photography with this lens. And the nice thing is that you can take pretty much any lens and just add some cheap extension tubes that you can find cheaply on eBay, and you will have a macro lens. And that is what I decided to try with the Helios. So if you want to try the same thing I did today, to add some extension tubes to get a macro lens out of a normal lens, just begin by adding like 2 centimeters of extension tubes and taking some test shots indoors so that you can verify that you get the kind of magnification you want. Magnification means how large objects will appear in your lens, and it will be rather fixed with extension tubes. You will not have that much wiggle room in terms of magnification. So it's important that you settle on a number of extension tubes or a distance before you go out, so you don't have to switch extension tubes when you're outside. So today I was using around 2 centimeters of extension tubes, and then the adapter, and then the lens, and that gave me a magnification that I found good to photograph water drops, and that was the main subject during my photo walk here out in the forest today. One of the nicest things with macro photography as a genre is that you can always go out, no matter the time of day or where you're at in the world, and get some beautiful photos. It doesn't matter if it's a grey, boring, dull winter day as it was today in Sweden. It doesn't matter if you live in a grey, dull, boring urban area. I went out into this small forest patch here that is only like a couple hundred meters by a couple hundred meters. And still I was able to find some really interesting photos of water drops on trees. You can see for yourself how boring the environment is and what kind of images you can still get if you just use a macro lens. So that is wonderful. I never need to travel anywhere to get nice photos. I never need to even go a few kilometers to find some nice landscape, I can always find nice subjects no matter where I'm at in the world. But of course it is more challenging in the winter to find interesting things to photograph. I mean, there are no insects, there are no flowers, and there aren't that many plants that are in other colors than like gray or brown. And that is why I tend to focus on water drops in the winter, because they are around quite often, and I tend to be on the lookout when it has been raining. If there are a lot of water drops, I often go for a photo walk. They always make nice photos, and today it was cloudy, so then the photos become like pretty interesting. But the most interesting water drop photos you get when it is sunny, when the sun shines through them, and unfortunately that doesn't happen that often here in Sweden, but of course sometimes it can happen, and that is when you can get really nice photos. But still, even in cloudy weather you can get okay photos of water drops, I would say. I would like to say something about white balance in macro photography. When I was a beginner, I always used auto white balance because I figured I don't want to think too much about white balance. I just want the camera to decide for me so that the photos come out good. But one thing I've discovered, and especially in the winter, is that when you're doing macro photography, the camera very often gets the white balance completely wrong. So since I discovered that, I actually always set the white balance manually to cloudy day or daylight, something like that, around 5600 Kelvin. Because that very often matches what kind of light it's out there, at least on a cloudy day. And even if you are using a flash, the flash will be in the same color, so the white balance will be very close to what you want to see in your camera. And I have found that this makes it a lot more easy to make nice photos, because you see already in your camera how the photo can look, and it usually looks a lot better with the correct white balance, which you will not that often get if you're using auto white balance. As I mentioned earlier, one drawback with using extension tubes to do macro photography is that you don't have that much range when it comes to the magnification. I mean, when you're not using extension tubes, you can focus of course anywhere from infinity to the minimum focusing distance of the lens, but when you add extension tubes, you will not have that much room to change the magnification. It will be pretty fixed. You can move it a little bit, I mean from maybe 5 centimeters to 7 centimeters, and from like a very large magnification to a slightly lower magnification, but you will not have that much room to move, and that is why it's so important to decide on the amount of extension tubes before you go out, so you don't have to switch that out in the field, because then you risk to get a lot of dust on your sensor. When it comes to settings, today I use the kind of settings I normally use on a cloudy day when I'm doing macro photography without a flash, and that is ISO 400, an aperture between 2.8 and 4, sometimes maybe 5.6, and a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second. Those settings tend to be very good on cloudy days to get the best possible exposures. To summarize, the Helios-44M is great fun, it is very cheap, although not the sharpest lens in the world, but if you're doing portraits or want a cheap macro lens, this can be a great option. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to my photography inspiration newsletter that comes out once per month, completely free. Sign up at mwrobe.com, and please also visit my Instagram to see more of my photography. That's it for this video, see you soon again, over and out, bye.